thank you all for joining us today. This is our very last presentation for the Public Service Perspectives series this spring semester, and we are thrilled to have Danny Twilley here with us for that last session. Before I turn it over to him, we will just go over our quick little housekeeping notes to make sure that we're all ready to go for his presentation. So we do ask that we keep our microphones muted throughout just to avoid any disruptions, but feel free to drop comments and questions in the chat throughout the presentation. At the end, we will open up for Q&A, so you can continue to put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand to ask out loud, and Jeff and I will call on you to unmute yourself. When Danny is screen sharing, I do recommend that you switch your video layout to side-by-side speaker mode. You will just click the view options up at the top right corner of your Zoom and then drop down and choose side-by-side. And then after he's done screen sharing, welcome you to go back to gallery view or speaker view if you want to highlight Danny. The last thing to note, this session is being recorded and will be added to our archives on our YouTube playlist as well. Before we go ahead and jump in, if anyone has any announcements or upcoming events they want to share with the group, I'll welcome you to go ahead and do so now. Jeff, I don't see Lorraine in here yet. I know she was going to attend. I know that tonight the Sustainability Film Series has Motherload. They will be presenting that film tonight. So recommend you all go check that out.
That's right. You can get it from the Athens Athena, and there's a 7 p.m. panel discussion as there is for all those films.
Okay, well, I think that's probably our only announcement to share with everyone. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Jeff DeBelko to introduce our speaker, Danny Twilley.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Mackenzie, and welcome everyone. It's so great to see so many friends and familiar faces there, as well as some new folks. And so terrific welcome to this Voinovich Wednesday Forum. It's a great pleasure to welcome back, virtually at least, to Ohio University in Southeastern Ohio, our friend and former colleague, Dr. Danny Twilley, who is now Assistant Dean at the Brad and Alys Smith Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative at West Virginia University. So still in the region, still close by, and still very generous to join us and share some insights. Many of you know Danny for his work here at Ohio University and in the region. He was a professor in the Patton College and taught ecotourism and led study abroad and study away programs, working with many of you here on the call. I will note that it's been a great pleasure for me to be able to work for some years with Danny on a study abroad program on environmental peace building in the Balkans, and so have had the privilege of working closely with him with many years. And so for today's discussion, though, I think many of you know, and kind of important to emphasize the role that Danny played as part of a dynamic team of doers and innovators who went from idea to reality with the Bailey's Trail system here, a project that was a public-private partnership to take advantage of outdoor recreation opportunities and economic development. And it's great to see so many people who are instrumental in making that a reality on the call today. It is a task that Danny now has, and he's going to tell us about, to in some ways take that approach to scale and do that for the state of West Virginia with their Outdoor Economic Development Cooperative. We've asked him to share some insights from those efforts with our diverse audience. We look forward to learning those lessons for engaged efforts in the community, and also to help us train the future innovators and doers through Voinovich Academy, our Masters of Public Administration, Environmental Studies, and our brand new degree, a Masters in Sustainability, Security, and Resilience, along with collaborations with so many of the kind of connected programs across the university. So Danny, we'll turn the floor to you and look forward to your remarks.
Well, first, thank you so much. It's so wonderful. I just want to hang out with all of you. There's so many great friends and friends I haven't met yet. I do want to give just a quick special shout out to someone who means the world to me, that he joined. Jeff, I don't know if you saw it, Ariane, all the way from the Balkans, has joined us. It is so wonderful to speak with my friends. So I could do this all day and thank all of you for the unique role that all of you have played in my life and my journey. But I think you all really want to hear about like what I'm up to and how I got here and how this all started. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dive right in. And I've been asked to kind of work and share with you all kind of how this idea of the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative came about. And so, and then I'll transition to how did that ultimately lead to, you know, one of the most transformative moments of my life and gifts to uplift the state, West Virginia, because I think that's kind of, you know, a really cool story. And then I'll transition that into kind of where we're headed. What does the outdoor economy look like for West Virginia? At any point, feel free to put a question in the chat. Jeff will be monitoring that. And then we'll have time at the end for Q&A where you can grill me, challenge me, and ask me like, where have we failed along the way? Where are our successes lying? And what lessons have I learned? But I'll start just by saying, Jeff opened it up very well by saying like, this was really built out of saying yes to a conversation in a meeting with Wayne and with Peter Katzis and Dawn McCarthy, which evolved into this thing that we would never have imagined, known as the Bailey's Trail System. That project is filled with joy, passion, frustration, success. We brought in other great partners. Many of them are on here. I see Seth Brown, who's been, you know, continues to carry just an amazing torch and light for that. But that project really transitioned me in my career of thinking about how outdoor recreation can truly solve economic and social issues in rural communities. I mean, you know, and so that laid the foundation for why I'm here today. So how does this all start? Well, it really started with, you know, that work with the Baileys led me down to Bentonville, Arkansas. When I was down in Bentonville, Arkansas, I'd been going there for several years doing work around, you know, helping communities create dynamic trail systems. And we would use Bentonville as like a model area. I had been down there on several occasions and a group from West Virginia University had shown up. And I had known Greg Corio, who founded the Adventure West Virginia program professionally for many years. Well, we were about 15 minutes into a bike ride and he looks at me and he's like, Danny, I didn't know you were doing this work anymore, or this type of work. I was like, yeah. And he asked me some questions and he said, oh, I'd love to see you at WVU. And of course I just laughed. I was like, yeah, okay. And he kept mentioning it. And then he laid out above the first Walmart on a piano, the maps of West Virginia. And that was where he asked myself and this gentleman, Rich Edwards, who's now part of our team, to come to WVU. And that was this experience. That was this experience right here. Is we went that May. That was in April. And then in May, he basically said, hey, I need you to come and tell the upper administration at the university. You know, I met with President Gee for a few minutes, but it was a lot of the provost and deans and other leaders, and just share with them what you think the potential for West Virginia is in this space. And so this is us. We got finished a ride. We had to go take a shower, get all cleaned up. This is me kind of cleaned up in the president's conference room. And I just gave a presentation about the possibility for West Virginia. Like, why is this so, why is West Virginia poised to do this? And I'll share with you some examples and case studies that I actually put on paper after this of how they are comparable. If we were out west, we'd be called Colorado, right? By all accounts. And how do we ignite that transformation in Appalachia and in West Virginia? And how can we kind of lead that charge? So that moment led to, he told me afterwards, he's like, yeah, there was a text thread going around. People were excited. They were talking. So that was in May. A few months later, I got invited to Snowshoe. This was at the World Cup. And this was the idea that said the provost and now my current boss, Mark Gavin, the associate provost, said, take Danny there and just sketch out what an office could look like. What could this be if we had the opportunity to create it? And so this was Greg and I. We started in with a cup of coffee, a blank piece of paper, and 2 pens. And he said this, he was like, Danny, I don't know what this is going to look like or when it will transform or come to be, but I know there's something special here. And I kind of like made a joke with him, like, yeah, whatever, Greg. But he really wanted to take this picture. And I never knew that I would be here today based off of this picture. So we spent about 2 days. This is what the room looked like afterwards. This is what we thought an office could look like if we had the opportunity. It was, and then we did go out and play and watch some really great mountain biking. So we were able to do all that. We wrote that up, he presented it to the leadership. And then they handed me a piece of paper a couple weeks later and said, Danny, I need you to write your job description because we don't know what to tell you to do and how to do this. And I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. So if I don't like my job, it's really only my fault at this point, but that's what I did. So I wrote my job description just saying, well, this is what I think I can do to help create this office. And now remember, we weren't even an office. We didn't even have a name at this point. And so come full circle, about 6 months later, I was back down in Bentonville, and this is one of my favorite trails there. It was new. And I get a phone call from President Gee. And President Gee called and said, Danny, I understand you've got a great thing in Southeast Ohio. You've got great friends. You've got great community. I've got you all. You all here make it so special. And he said, but I need you to come help figure out how to help West Virginia use its outdoor recreation resources to change a state. And of course, I'm like, President Gee, no one's really ever done that from the ground up. Colorado and Utah and Western North Carolina are catching up to the trend. No one's really established it and brought it from the ground up. I was like, I don't know how to do it. I was like, I don't. I was like, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And so he's like, that's all I ask. So fast forward, I went and shared it with my 2 great friends, Andy and Bruce, and they were as supportive and as caring as 2 individuals could be, except they didn't help me pack my office up, which I'm still going to hold you on that one, guys. But I ultimately started in January of last year, day 3, we named the office. We didn't even have a name. So that's where we started from a piece of paper to a name. And I remember my first several meetings, everyone was like, how do you like it? And I was like, look, if you asked me to come here and be a faculty member, I would know exactly what I would be doing. But I don't really know like where to begin with this. I said that for about 3 days. And then after that, I haven't really looked back since, and my schedule hasn't been open since. And so what the first task I was asked to do was, okay, put this on paper, put this into a presentation. So what you're about to see is several iterations later, but this is how we created the case. We knew that we had to tell the story. We had to tell the story of why, and we had to build it off of data and a narrative. And that's what we did. And so this presentation, or a version of this presentation, we have given hundreds of times to various people. And one of the interesting pieces when we were given this presentation, we were giving it to political leaders, to business leaders, one of the top leaders of one of the major law firms in West Virginia. And at the end of it, we'd get off these calls and Greg and I would look at each other and say, they didn't push back, right? Either they hate it or they don't know what to do with it. They just didn't know. But what we were really doing is people were coming to the table asking us how they could help. And so that's what we started with, and that's what we did. So I don't have time to go through the presentation step by step as we would normally give it, or as I would normally give it, because it takes about 30 to 40 minutes to do so. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some key pieces, key ways that we told the story, key ways that we built it. And this presentation ultimately led to the $25 million gift. And I'll share with you how it did that and some of the nuances of that experience. So we started out with this idea of let's talk about the national trends. What's happening nationally? And so we were using this data from the Outdoor Industry Association, talking about it's an $887 billion industry. When it's compared to, motor vehicles and parts and pharmaceuticals, it's double. It's basically as big as those two combined. The only things that beat it are healthcare and financial services when we look at it. And this is in totality. This is from the water bottles to the trips to the lodging. It is the broadest umbrella possible that we could possibly look for the outdoor economy and spending as it relates to outdoor recreation. In addition, we see time and time again, places like Grand Junction. This is from Sarah Schrader. Outdoor recreation can change the face of rural America. In 4 years, this place has made a complete turnaround. And this was Grand Junction, and this was just off mountain bike trails. They do have a river that goes through it, but it's not like it's not, people aren't flocking to it because it's not the iconic part of the Colorado. But it is really around their mountain biking trails. And as you can see, outdoor recreation is studying incline, oil and gas is declining steadily. And so how do we leverage our outdoor recreation resources? In addition, we see offices of outdoor recreation. They really started in 2013, but it wasn't until 2015 the ideas started coming to bear. In 2017, it picked up a lot of speed because we started doing the outdoor economy data or outdoor economic data around it. This was the interesting piece. It's between 2012 and 2017, the national average was 16.6% growth in the outdoor recreation economy. For West Virginia, when we look around surrounding states, Indiana, Ohio at 10%, Virginia 16, 19% for North Carolina. When I did the calculations for West Virginia was at 1%. That was at 1%. And we're sitting in there saying, how is West Virginia at 1%? We only beat Louisiana, which lost, and Kansas doubled us. So how is that possible given our outdoor recreation resources? So of course I was a little bit taken back, but then I said, well, this is the opportunity. Like this is why we can make a difference in how we can move the needle. So you couple that with this trend that was happening. And this is the article that really turned President Xi's head. And this was all around the outdoor partners. They surveyed the 50 fastest growing businesses in what they call the Silicon Slope. And that's kind of from Provo to Ogden along the Wasatch Front in Utah. And basically what they were finding is that the business leaders were there because they wanted to be there for outdoor recreation. They could the talent was there because these people wanted to be able to ski, bike, and climb, on the weekends, after work, during the lunch breaks, or they could steal the talent from Silicon Valley. So outdoor recreation was the underlying theme to the entire reason why these businesses were growing and expanding in that. Interesting part for us is that, Utah's running out of water and the air pollution on that part of the country is bad already. And they're expecting the population to double in the next 20 years. And so, we're like, okay, well, this trend is being exacerbated around the quality of life. So how can we position West Virginia for it? We get great people like Neil Norbash, professor. He's a distinguished professor of robotics. And this is what he talks about.
But you know what they're doing today? My best entrepreneur friends, who are all rock climbers and long distance trail runners, they all come down here to the New River Gorge. So they have to spend 3 hours commuting to their fun. So I ask you, if you had 4 outstanding companies near the New River Gorge, and they were told they could have a 10-minute commute on a bicycle to work and another 10-minute commute to the New River Gorge to do all the rock climbing that they want, I think a whole lot of people would snap up that opportunity.
So yeah, he's at Carnegie Mellon, right? And he's telling that, and there was a lot of great leaders in the room that day. Then we start looking at places like Roanoke. Roanoke is now associating this idea of outdoor recreation and trade. Locate your business here. They've got this great video partway down. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's showing someone leaving their house. And as they leave their house, they're going to all the great food, the downtown, the museums, the parks. It's all around quality of life. And, Roanoke's trying to emerge as a kind of a little bit of a tech center in that part of West Virginia, or in part of Virginia. You've got places like Duluth. Duluth in the late 80s, GM left, and it decimated that community. It got so bad that they actually paid for a sign. Well, the last one leaving Duluth, please turn out the lights. Like, think about that. That's a billboard that someone actually paid. So what they did as part of their strategy, they did a small self-tax. They started building something called the Duluth Traverse. They started connecting people throughout the community via a trail system that was interwoven through the community. And now it's one of the 5 IMBA Ride Center Gold destinations in the entire country, and there's only 7 in the world. And so they used it as part of their transformation strategy. We've all heard of Walmart, right? Walmart in Bentonville. Interestingly enough, if you go back about 15 years, I mean, it was, Walmart was really growing. And at the time, they were recruiting talent from, Houston, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York to, grow it into what it is. And they were having trouble keeping them. The people were leaving because it didn't have the quality of life they were looking for. It was missing the food, the art, the recreation, and culture that they wanted. So at one point, they were looking at moving their headquarters. Sam Walton said, well, hold on, this area gave us a start. Let's invest back into it. A lot of the Walton families, these are 2 of the grandsons of Sam Walton, they all have homes in the mountain towns of Colorado. And they said, man, these places are rural, they're isolated, but they have great food, great culture, great shopping, and people want to be here. How do we create a mountain town feel in Northwest Arkansas? They looked around. They don't have skiing. They don't have climbing. They don't have whitewater. So what can they do? They started building trails. It just so happens they happen to be cyclists. So Tom Walton right here actually started building trail. He built originally 5 miles of trail. Right up here was kind of where he did it. And then that was around 2010. By 2013, that was 2007. By 2010, it became part of their full development strategy. Fast forward, they've connected communities and neighborhoods to trails. And now the great part is that it's considered one of the top 5 best places to live, and it's the 5th fastest growing U.S. city. And they've done that in about 13 years. It's taken them to do that. Now, they've had a pretty big checkbook to be able to do it, but it's not unreasonable to be able to do. They help transform that area. And here's the fun part, is now it's having this great effect from Fayetteville, right, home of University of Arkansas, up to Bentonville. It's about 30 some miles. And now Springdale and Rogers in between are really starting to grow, and people are moving there 5 and 6 degrees separated from Walmart now. And so they were estimating pre-COVID about 4 people a day were moving into the Northwest Arkansas area. So pretty powerful what they are doing there. So let's talk about retention. This is something that really worked in our favor, right? At least as part of the narrative. It doesn't work economically, but we started looking at population growth. Well, we can sit there and say that West Virginia has lost more population between 2007 and 2017 than any other state in the country. We're thinking we're going to be in the bottom of that list again with the new census coming out. If you take a look, Utah was the fastest growing during that same period. Texas was second, and then Colorado was third. Interestingly enough, this is in parallel to some of the growth in the outdoor economy. That's correlation, not necessarily causation. But how can we look at some baseline assumptions, right, that can potentially help us understand this compelling narrative? So you got places like McKinsey and Company. The generation born between 1980 and 2000 is outspending Generation Xers and baby boomers on things like travel, activity, and sport. This transformed my thinking, because basically what it's saying is Generation Xers tend to be well established in their careers. They might be just empty nesters, but they have disposable income, and many of them have more time now than they have before. Baby boomers typically have time and money. The generation born between 1980 and 2000 is either graduating college or they're starting young families, young career. So they typically don't have time and or money, but they're outspending those with time and money on things like travel, activities, and sports. You couple that with this idea of people moving towards an experience-driven lifestyle, this report that came out of the Brookings Institute, it starts telling us that there's a trend, that people are looking for, where do I live first, work second. So how do we capitalize on that? And this is the governor of Vermont talking about how Vermont is using their outdoor recreation as a recruitment strategy for talent.
So becoming known as some of the best mountain biking in the country, quickly becoming known for that. And I think that's something special as well, because it solves a couple problems. We have a place called UTC Collins Aerospace in Vermont, and they're looking to expand, which is good news for us, but they need engineers. They need mechanical and electrical engineers, and they were coming to us and saying we could use 100 engineers, but we can't find them. And so I went, we're trying to help them out. I went to another area of the state the very next day, and they said, there was an engineering firm there. And I said, are you having problems finding employees, engineers? And they said, no, actually, no, we're not having any problems finding engineers. And I said, well, what's the secret sauce? We want to share this with UTC Collins Aerospace because they need some employees. And they said, every time we need an engineer, we put an ad in the mountain biking magazine, and we get an instant hit, and we hire almost immediately. So that leverages a lot, and it's very important.
So it really helps when your governor believes in it as well. So that's gone a long way. So basically, we've set the stage of like nationally, this is working, right? We look at Western North Carolina, we look at Colorado, Utah, we look at what's happening in Oregon and Northwest Arkansas. So then we say, okay, well, if it's working there, maybe they have something that we don't. And so what we did is we started diving in and started doing a ton of data collection for West Virginia. We started looking at the economics, right, of climbing. We started looking at, this idea that engineers are attracted to climbing because of three-dimensional, right? It's three-dimensional problem solving. And so they're really attracted to that. We know that with the climbing going into the Olympics, we're going to see a growth in this. We can tell you that there's a ton of economic data out there in terms of the economic impact that it has just from that visitation, not talking about people moving to an area because of this work. We then start looking at what we have here in West Virginia. And this was done by a student. We had a student kind of reach out to all the climbing gyms and say, okay, when you go to climb outside, where do you go? Like if you're going to go climb somewhere. And it was astounding. Pretty much they were coming to West Virginia, whether it was coming to the New, to Seneca, or to Cooper's Rock in that area of Morgantown. And so we knew that we had something special. So then we started, we used Mountain Project, and we started looking at, this is basically representative of about a 30-minute drive from downtown, 60-minute drive, and then about an hour and a half, because this is the stuff you can do after work, on your weekends, right? It's part of your lifestyle. And we see what Chattanooga has, right? And Chattanooga has a strong climbing scene. They're really good there. We take a look at Asheville. Asheville is known as like an outdoor town. They really, within an hour drive, they have 2 boulder problems within an hour drive. It doesn't really get good until you start getting down towards Brevard. So then we said, well, what does Morgantown have? Right within this 30-minute drive, and this is about 15 minutes away from town, we have over 500 published routes. And we think there's about 500 more that aren't published right now. And it's all accessible. So we started saying, oh my gosh, we have stuff that's close by, it's accessible, it can be lifestyle driven. That's pretty powerful. So then we said, okay, what's another differentiator, right? You can't build rock, you can't build whitewater. So let's take a look at that. So as the West is getting drier and we're getting wetter, how do we take advantage of this? This map right here shows the geospatial density of whitewater. Okay, every whitewater run in the country is geospatially laid on top of each other. And basically what it shows is that we have the highest density of whitewater in the entire country. When the researcher did this, who did this for us, he came running down to our offices and being like, oh my goodness, we knew it was good. We just didn't know how good it was. So then the next question then becomes, okay, this is great. What is our runnability? Like how often can this stuff run? And so we started, again, taking a look and said, what percentage of time, and this is a 10-year average of USGS data, and starts looking at runnability. Boulder Creek, the main whitewater run outside of Boulder, Colorado, a very iconic outdoor town, runs 25% of the year. Within an hour, we got the lower Yacht runs 100%, the upper Yacht 56%. The Big Sandy is 30 minutes from my door to the put-in, one of the most iconic runs in the entire East Coast, runs 50% of the year. So not only do we have it, it also runs frequently enough. But still, that wasn't good enough. We started thinking about, okay, what class runs do we have? So we started looking at distance for class 1, class 2, and class 3, and we've overlaid those with runnability as well. So now we're telling the story. We've got density, we've got diversity, and now we have runnability to try to use that as a strategic differentiator for what we have. And so within an hour and a half of Morgantown, we have over 605 miles. From Beckley, over 820 miles, and Thomas and Davis has over 1,100 miles of whitewater within an hour and a half. And we've actually funded the researcher and a grad student to do this work nationally. So we're going to be putting out some great articles on this net for looking at it nationally. We started doing some stuff around mountain biking as well, talking about how mountain biking, the spending for mountain bikers as well. And so we put all this piece together, and basically what it comes down to is not only do we have this, that is comparable to these other iconic outdoor states, these outdoor iconic locations. We're better than some of them. So how do we leverage that? And then that's really the work of this office. I will share with you, as we started working through that whole process, we gave this version of the presentation to Brad Smith, and I'll tell you that story in just a minute. Partway through the presentation, he took off his glasses, leaned forward, and he said, this is the most exciting idea I've heard for West Virginia in my entire career. I'm in. How do we do this? All right. We hadn't even got to our remote worker stuff at this point. So it was a pretty transformational moment. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about some of the work that we do on a daily basis. Our office has two kind of sectors. Greg Corio leads the youth education piece, which consists of the science behind the sport. This is basic and science adventure school. What this is doing is taking 6th grade science STEM standards and connecting it to adventure activities. And then they do that for 6th graders through Science Adventure School. And then for Science Behind the Sport, they do that as kind of a public outreach, working with teachers and educators doing that work. And we're looking to grow that program. We received just over $1 million donation, and we're looking to scale that to eventually have all 6th graders in the entire state go through that. Our other work that we do a lot of education and outreach. I do a lot of these presentations, talking to people about the vision. And I won't be able to show it to you because of time. You know what? Actually, I'm going to, because it's worth it.
In terms of,
this is John Chambers, former CEO of Cisco Systems. He basically revolutionized the internet, I mean, by all accounts. And at one point, his company was the largest company in the world.
while West Virginia is changing as a state and university so rapidly, I would argue faster potentially than any other state if we do our job right, is we're learning how to dream it. And we have learned that dreams don't come true without you helping them. The ability to reinvent the curriculum at West Virginia University and at Marshall, to focus more on outcomes and entrepreneurship, to have the courage to go after new major projects that perhaps 2 or 3 years ago we wouldn't dream possible, and then to reward the successes and deal with the failures, of which there'll be a number. This is part of a normal process. And it's one of the many things I'm proud about we Mountaineers. We are good.
Yeah, so I mean, I share that with you because that's what we do with these types of presentations, is showing West Virginia and West Virginians what's possible, to dream big, to take a chance, to try something, because traditional economic development has been slow to move the needle in this part of the country. So we've got to think of something different, and that's where our work really comes in. So let's talk about this, because I think most people are really going to want to know. So how we ended up where we are today. And it's kind of crazy. We were about 2 months in, still kind of spinning our wheels. I got a chance to travel with, it was Greg and myself, President Guy, and Dean of the Business School, Javier Reyes, which I will give a credit to Dean Reyes and his partner in crime, Liz Vitullo. We would not be here without them today. They have challenged us and helped us and supported us in ways that are just immense. And they are our greatest advocates and allies and partners in this whole work. But we were traveling down to Dallas, and on the way back, President Guy and Javier got invited to hear Brad Smith. He brought the CEOs of PayPal and Adobe to Huntington, West Virginia. So, you know, Greg and I were handbags. We were along for the ride. So we go in, and it was basically like a Q&A, you know, and it was the first inaugural CEO panel. And of course, if you ever get a chance to hear Brad speak, he's so dynamic, so caring, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. And so we're taking tons of notes. And then he said this, and this changed it all.
The second point I wanted to make is this notion of employees. I always, when I come back, someone says, well, when's your company going to open up more offices? Can you get PayPal to open up offices? Can you get Adobe? Well, here's the secret. 25% of our employees that we pay can work from anywhere they want in the world. They're called remote employees. And there's another city that I've been learning from. I'm going to go visit in 3 weeks on a bus tour called Tulsa, Oklahoma. They created a program called Tulsa Remote. And what they did is they found out Generation Z and the millennials love outdoors. They love whitewater rapids. They love hiking. They love being out. They love being able to afford their homes and not have traffic for 3 hours. And so Tulsa said, we're going to start marketing to those people and have them come and live in Tulsa for 1 year. We'll help them with their relocation, and we'll see if they stay. They thought they would get 100 people. They had 10,000 applicants. The average family that moved to Tulsa is $106,000. The tax base of Tulsa has gone up, and these people are now starting to form friendships and start businesses in Tulsa. So we can get.
Yeah. So Greg and I did this long, uncomfortable stare at each other, and we both describe it this way. We're like, Tulsa, Oklahoma, outdoor rec, what? And we basically, that night, I started reading everything I could about Tulsa remote, about remote working, because I didn't even know how to define it. And I just started diving in because I was, I said, oh my gosh, this could be it. It was the first thing that we really could sink our teeth into. I think, how could we use that as a platform? And so we ultimately created a presentation where we took it to, we incorporated it into. And I'll share with you that it was a version of this presentation with a whole lot of focus on the remote worker piece. And we presented it to a very prominent former political leader in Ohio, former presidential candidate. So has done tons of economic development work, growth of state. And he loved the outdoor economy, loved it, thought we were spot on. We get to the remote worker piece and shot us down, said, there's just no way. Like, you invest in companies, you don't people, who's going to pay for this? No one has the money. How's this going to work? And you got to realize, like, I come at things full steam ahead. I'm excited. I'm fired up and thinking it will work. And I hadn't gotten shot down that quickly since my first middle school dance when I asked a girl to dance with me. I mean, I got shut down, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I was still living in Athens. COVID. This was all pre-COVID, right? This was February of last year. Was when I guess it was March of last year when we did that presentation. And it just didn't move the needle. So of course you get gut punched, right? You're like, oh my gosh, maybe we're wrong. This person's like connected, established. Maybe we're not onto it. So I cut my grass, right, and just kind of like let it, kind of marinate that. And I got on the phone with Greg afterwards, and I said, I think we're right. I absolutely think we're right on this. I don't think we're wrong. So he said, why don't we text Brad and see if we can like connect with Brad? And he was just like, okay. And so we connected with Brad and we said, hey, we've got an idea we want to run by you. And can you give us an hour? So we're thinking we'd never hear back. We might get something a year from now. Who knows? He said, yeah, I just moved some things on my schedule. How about Wednesday at 3 o'clock? Or it was 2 or 3 o'clock. So that was 5 days. So I didn't really sleep for 5 days. I went back in and built the budget out. I did the programming. I built this presentation out, built it out. I think I hit save, about 10 minutes before the presentation. And we give it to him. And we get to the remote worker piece. And we said to him, we're like, we want your guidance. We didn't ask for funding. We didn't care. We just wanted his time and his talent to help us get this thing and strategize how to get it off the ground. And we connected this whole thing to outdoor recreation into this quality of life narrative. And he said, well, look, we're going to make mistakes, but I don't want to make the same mistakes. And so now we have to go do homework. And so he made a few connections for us, gave us a few challenges, and that's what we did. We spent 3 weeks, and this was kind of an iterative process. We would go do our homework for about 2 weeks, and then we'd set a meeting with him about week number 3, and then we'd present it to him, and he'd be like, this is great. You did this, this, and this. Now go figure out the A, B, and C. And we'd go figure it out. Remember, I didn't even know what a remote worker was, and if you would have asked me when I started this job, if I would be working in this space, I'd have said, I have no idea what I'll be doing, but I don't think it's going to be that. And so we kept doing this iterative process over and over. And we finally got to a point of where, and I think it's funny, is he finally said to us, he's like, guys, don't be afraid to ask for the sale. That's his speak for saying, ask me for what you want. And we're like, no, we still got one more presentation. We still got to fix a few things. And, like any good thing, it only exists as an idea until you put it on paper, then it becomes real. So I spent about 3 weeks, myself and Liz Vitullo, Dr. Liz Vitullo, writing this 50-page document about what this could be and what it would look like. And we presented it to him and his wife, Alys. In 3 months to the day from our first meeting with him, he committed to $25 million. It's just hard to understand and put into words. Even today, I get choked up on it. To have someone like that has been so successful, has taken and ripped apart and built up projects from the ground up, reinvented companies, to sit there and look at your work and look at you and say, I believe enough in you and your work to invest my personal money into seeing if we can make it a go. And he said to us, he said, look, in Silicon Valley, we find good ideas, but we invest in great people because great people bring good ideas to excellence. And that's what I'm doing here. And it's still to this day, it's hard for me to even comprehend someone believing in me and our team and this work and this vision and this opportunity to this point. So yeah, 3 months from first meeting, and that's innovation, right? I mean, we love the problem more than we love the solution, and I love the problem, and I'm just working and grinding every day to figure it out. This right here was us celebrating in October when the official announcement, and this is, and just for you all to know, to bring it full circle, today we received university recognition today, the three of us, because this is Allison Conroy, who moves mountains without ever being asked, and we brought this thing to life, and that's how we got it. And so on a daily basis, this is what I get to do. And so the project's really built around incentivizing remote workers, but it's also, we're doing a ton of work in building outdoor recreation and assets. We're also doing a ton of work in community. And so I didn't write this down for about a year. This is the work I do, outdoor economy, talent attraction, right? That's what we're doing. Outdoor community development. So we're hiring a position to help communities be prepared and take advantage of their outdoor assets. We hired Rich Edwards from IMBA to help us get the best quality recreation on the ground. I'm working on about $3 million in grants on these two items here. And if I get those, we're going to be working in all 5 spaces. It's all around entrepreneurship, and I'm partnered with regional development authorities and the Chambers College of Business on both of these. And then finally, we're continuing to do research and fund it. And so that's kind of it. I'll stop there because you've heard enough of me talk, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Danny, so much. It was, you had breadth and depth as well as passion, and it's terrific to see such hard work and good ideas be rewarded with the opportunity to take it to action. And so thank you for doing that. We have the opportunity for folks to drop questions in the chat, or also we can also ask them, right? I'm not sure whether the raise hand function is enabled on the call here, but turn on your video and wave and we'll get your question in. I'm waiting to see if you got lots of fans in the chat at this point, Danny. It's affirmation rather than questions. Who would like to pose a question? Mary Nally has a question. Why don't you go ahead, Mary?
Sure, thank you so much, Danny. It's wonderful to see you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary Nally, Director of the Center for Campus and Community Engagement here at Ohio University, and I'm continuing to collaborate with the folks with the Bailey's Trail system, as well as the Ohio's Winding Road Network. And I know in both of those groups, one question that comes up that I'd like to hear from you about, Danny, is how local municipalities in the communities in West Virginia are potentially preparing for challenges related to gentrification, zoning regulations that they may need to put in place to protect their locally owned and operated businesses, as well as ensure that housing and other essentials are affordable to those who want to stay in West Virginia, of course, knowing that a lot of our communities in the Appalachian region tend to veer toward low income, and we want to protect those individuals.
Yeah, Mary, I mean, if I had that answer, I think we would all be in a different place, right? And so one of the things that our office is built off of, and my team, particularly in the outdoor economy, we have to solve the yes. That's our job on a daily basis, right? Is like we solve the yes. If the idea is good enough, that's what we do. We don't know how we're going to do it. I tell people all the time, we're hiring like crazy. And my number one thing they ask is, what do we need in people? And I said, I need someone to build a plane as we fly it. I don't know what plane we're building. I don't even know where we're headed. But I know we're flying, and I know we're in a plane, and that's it. And so, you know, I think we come at it with that attitude. And the reason why that's important in answering your question, because every community is different. I can't say what we're doing in one community is going to work in another, because they all start at a different level. And so you have to meet them where they are. We are oftentimes getting asked this question about how do we keep the value system, right? We hear they want opportunity, but they don't want change. And I'm very real with them. I said, well, those two you can't have your cake and eat it too on this one. So what don't you want to change? What is so important to you and your community that you don't want to change? And then everything else we have to put on the table to potentially compromise on. And then as we come into new obstacles, how we have to work towards them. And you know, in the Baileys, we've done this, I think, in so many ways. And there's a lot of great community advocacy groups. West Virginia Hub's a great one. Generation West Virginia here. So we rely on them. We're not trying to rebuild the wheel here on this. So what we're also doing, and that's where the outdoor community development piece is coming into play. And we're hiring a position, and more than likely it's going to end up being 2 positions. And so we're doing 2 things strategically on that. We're creating a playbook, which would basically say, we did a comprehensive community evaluation, all the data geeks on there, we can connect afterwards. We looked at over 5 different categories, 40 different factors, and 40,000 lines of data to come up with this quantitative evaluation for communities. All it was to start the conversation, to know where we have to start. Housing and broadband, hands down, are the things that are affecting our communities today, right? And so we could sit there and say, well, until housing and broadband's fixed, we shouldn't do anything. Well, that's not what we want, right? That's not where to start. So how do we do it in parallel? And that's really what we're trying to accomplish. So we're partnering with, regional development groups. We're trying to figure out what they need in order to be successful. And how do we lean into them and how do they lean into us? And so, that's where we're starting from. And so the playbook is designed to sit there and say, well, if this is your gap, here are the resources. Here's the gap, here's your resources. And so then the community, outdoor community development person then comes in and helps facilitate those conversations in order to help move them along. Because as you know, it's a lot about community capacity. And so that's why we're hiring those positions to basically create the roadmap, but then facilitate those conversations. And then the final thing I'll say to that is, Mary, is we're really operating under the table of the willing. We need the people who want this to be part of their strategy, because there's a lot of communities that have the potential, but doesn't mean that it's going to work for them, because if you don't have community buy-in and willingness, then it won't work. And so how do we start there? And so that there's enough work to do in West Virginia that we can't pull along those who don't want it. So I have a lifetime of work for communities that want this. And then finally, and this is my second finally on it, Mary, this is a 20-year initiative. This is 20 years. And I am very clear with people, $25 million is a start. It is not the end piece to this. It is the start to the conversation. And this is, it's a 20-year work. If you look at Colorado, Utah, Northwest Arkansas is an anomaly, Western North Carolina, Duluth, all of them were 20-year turnarounds. And so that's, so hopefully by the time I retire, Mary, I'll be able to give you a much better answer for that.
All right, Danny, we do have a number of questions. We only have 7 minutes left, so maybe we'll collect those. Starting with Eli Flournoy has one, wants to touch base on the broadband, and then we'll go to Bruce and Sam, and then why don't we get Louis Allens as well, and then we'll give you a chance to wrap it up and answer all 4 of those at once. So hold your answers until we get those questions. Eli, you want to?
Yeah, just to make it brief. I mean, you already identified broadband as that's a significant issue. I find myself in working on these economic development projects, just wanting to tell everybody, forget everything else. Let's just all concentrate on broadband, because until we get that in place, so many other things can't be done. But what can you give an example of? What is your approach? What is your strategy related to rural?
Yeah. So my strategy is I know enough about broadband to be dangerous, but I know the people who know how to do it. And so I find them, right? And again, I say, well, if we sit there and try to make the case for broadband without showing the need, then it's really hard. So what we can do is show the need, and then we couple that together with this. And so we're trying to do it in parallel. So we're very fortunate. There's a woman named Natalie Roper out of Generation West Virginia. You think I've got energy, I can't keep up with her. And so she basically recognized, and one of our large foundations recognized it, and it basically said this, is that the money's out there to build the broadband infrastructure, but there's 2 things that are holding them back. And I'm oversimplifying it here, Eli, but is either they don't have a plan, or if they do have a plan, they don't know how to operationalize that plan, because broadband's not seen as a utility. That becomes problematic. So then any of that federal money that comes in, it has to be owned by kind of the municipality or the group. And these people don't know how to run utilities and deal with maintenance and operation, but private companies do. So she's basically trying to work with them to connect the private companies with these municipalities to get the funding to then put it all together. And that's just one strategy. So my direct strategy is to work with her and work with others in there, and then say, I'm willing to come to the table and tell you why broadband's important to our economic development strategy and trying to push that forward. But here's the great thing, is in many parts of the world, as people were trying to lay lines for telephones, what ended up coming in and disrupting the entire telecommunications industry? Cell phones. right? So I firmly believe we're on the verge of a disruption of the need for that direct broadband, right? We know that the interlink that, that the Virgin or that they're working on could be, that system. So I think we're probably going to see a disruption before we get all the fiber laid. I hope that answers the approach.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks.
So with apologies to the folks who asked them, because I'm sure they could ask them much better. Danny, I'm going to give you 3 questions from the chat, and then you can do the best you can in just a few minutes that we have. So apologies to Bruce, Sam, and Louis, but Bruce would like to know what beyond Bailey's, what sort of opportunities would you envision for Athens County? What would you have been working on had you stayed here, and what would be the next approach? Sam wants to know about what relationship, if any, have you had with the extractive industries in West Virginia? Obviously, in order to have those outdoor recreation opportunities, those mountains actually still have to be standing. And so how does that, how has that conversation gone forward with conflicts or challenges or cooperation? And finally, Louis was interested in implications for field practitioners and rec providers. What are the conversations you're having with those direct frontline providers of these opportunities?
So to answer the
I'll give you a chance to.
Yeah. So to answer the question for Bruce, I'd be following Jesse, whatever Jesse would need. Jesse Powers, who's the executive director of Orca, would be what I'd be working on. That's kind of my funny answer, but my serious answer is I firmly believe the most underutilized resource in Athens right now, in Athens County, is the Hocking River. How do we get people to it? It's right next to campus, right next to town. It's right next to a bike path. I mean, it's got the recipe. It's got the recipe. So I'd be focused so much on getting access to that. I know there's, I'd also be coming to Ted as well, because I know Ted's doing a lot in the climbing space and being like, Ted, what do you need? Because there's several different places, and we tried a few years ago, Ted, you were part of that conversation that we just didn't quite get. But I think there's opportunities for land that has great climbing, and I'd be reaching out to my GIS and geospatial people, the people at the university that can help me find those properties for climbing. So I'd be working heavily on those too, but I think it would have to be focused on the river. I think that could really, really do a whole lot for the community. Extractive industries, yeah, we talk regularly. I shouldn't say regularly, but anybody we talk to in the state, whether politically, socially, has a connection to the extractive industries. I'll give Jeff Lusk down in the Hatfield McCoys. I mean, this guy's a visionary and innovator. He's connected and partnered with these landholding companies to get UTV and ATV trails and development. It's amazing what he's done. So I think there's partnership opportunities there as well. And we feel like there's a momentum shifting in terms of, we recognize that the energy industry will still be a staple of our economy, but we also have to evolve and grow. So a lot of our greatest allies have deep roots in the extractive industry. Louis, I don't necessarily know if I can fully answer your question. I think you and I will have to go climbing in West Virginia, and I can answer that for you. The final thing I'll say to wrap it all up, this is something that I didn't share, but it's really important part of this conversation, is about 2 weeks after we received the gift. Friday afternoon, President Gee pulls a meeting with myself, Liz, Greg, and a consultant on a Friday at 4 o'clock. And the person was like, can you tell me what you're up to? And we're like, oh, we're kind of doing this. She goes, okay, I got enough, please. She goes, most people would sit there and put their feet up on their desk and say, I made it. My career's made. I got this great gift. I've never been kicked in the gut like this before. She said, now you all have the biggest obligation you have ever had. You need to double or triple that gift. If you don't do that, you have failed the opportunity before you. I about threw up, because I was like, man, I just want to go take a nap. Like, I just want to sleep. I've been working nonstop for, months on this. I just want to sleep. But she was right. She was absolutely right. And of course, we rallied and stepped up, and we're living what Brad Smith calls, and he calls it the flywheel effect. How do we leverage this to have greater and deeper impact and reach 55 strong? And I made a promise to Brad and Alys. I will not stop until we touch all 55 counties and help them in some way, shape, or form. And we, in the next couple months, we're going to be through partnerships. We're on the verge of coming close to doubling the opportunity that we originally set out before us. And so there's nothing like a good challenge and a little bit of realism to take you to the next level. And so going back to what John Chambers said is, dare to dream big. And as Brad Smith said, the difference between excellence and perfection is excellence is the willingness to be caught learning on the way to perfection. And so with that, that's what I challenge you all to do for Southeast Ohio, a place that I love and hold dearly.
Thank you, Danny. That's a great way to wrap. Mackenzie, I'll throw it to you for a final word, but Danny, thank you so much for sharing these insights and the passion and energy that you have for these issues of common interest. Mackenzie, final word.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and thank you so much, Danny, for joining us today. I can't, echo enough what everyone is saying in the chat. I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see all the great work you do for West Virginia. And so keep in touch, and we hope to bring you back in person so that we can all do this big reunion again. But thank you again. I want to be respectful of your time, so we'll sign off on that note. But I want to wish you all a great rest of your week, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
So thank you, Danny. Thank you. Great to
Thanks,
see you all.
everyone,
Thanks for
joining.
tuning in.
I appreciate
Thank you.
you.